Well, today, good afternoon, everyone. Well, good evening, everyone. Excuse me. It's right now Friday evening, closing in on 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. As you can see, we once again had another pretty day. I hope everyone's had a great day today. But you can obviously tell that things are beginning to change. If you heard a lot in the media, the tropics beginning to change significantly. The MJO, which is finally beginning to move its way back into our side of the world, has finally moved into the Eastern Pacific, moving into it as we speak, and which has helped ignite several tropical cyclone formation. We already have Tropical Storm Iran, I believe, Tropical Storm Hova, and then we have another area they're also keeping a close eye on. Speaking for the Atlantic terms, we're also pretty quiet in the Atlantic, except we're dealing with Tropical Storm Philippe, which is beginning to move off to the northeast, and there's obviously no threat to land. Here's a look right now at the National Hurricane Center's graphical weather outlook. Right now, as of earlier this afternoon, calling for Tropical Storm Philippe, which is located just east of Bermuda, far off to the east of Bermuda, being felt up by the troughiness, and is beginning to lose its tropical characteristics. Will continue to weaken over the next several days as it moves farther off into the north and east. You can see this little gray murkiness, shadowless color right here, which is obviously showing that there obviously is a lot more stable and colder air beginning to move in after this trough moves through. So obviously this will end the Cape Verde season, which obviously means it will begin to get a lot quieter over the Cape Verde Islands. Here's a look right now at the Eastern Pacific. Right now, obviously, it remains very active over that region. We're dealing with not one, but two tropical cyclones, very dangerous storms as well. Tropical Storm Hurricane Iran, which has winds of 90 miles an hour. We have Tropical Storm Hova, which remains a tropical cyclone right now, a tropical storm, and over the next several days, this actually could become another hurricane, actually a pretty strong hurricane, as this moves. Both of these systems are actually moving on to the east, and both of these are actually posing threats to Mexico. And as you can see farther off to the right, the National Hurricane Center obviously is continuing to watch also another area of disturbed weather over the southwestern portions of Mexico, which the National Hurricane Center is giving a 30% chance of formation. Here's a look at the models for the European model sweep, obviously showing Philippi located farther off to the north and east, right around this region, beginning to get felt up by the trough, which is obviously slackening right here, which has helped send this off to the northeast. You can see that we have an area of high pressure which is developing over portions of the southeastern coastline, which is obviously mimicking rising pressures obviously around the southern coast of Florida. You can see by this darkness red right here is where the stagnant pressures are beginning to come up together. We're starting to see the isobars beginning to get very tight, a tight pressure gradient between the area of high pressure into the northeast, and obviously the potential subtropical formation that we're seeing in the southeastern coast of Florida. Let's see if I can go to our next frame. You can see once again the Euro model is potentially showing a weak area of low pressure developing off the northeastern coast of Florida, right off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, potentially developing into a tropical cyclone. It doesn't really have it too intense, but it may still produce some very heavy rainfall. This likely will produce some very heavy rainfall over portions of Florida. We're talking about some areas may get up to a foot of rainfall, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but Florida actually does need some rainfall. They obviously will take it, but obviously they will not appreciate seeing this amount of rainfall coming down in such a short period. Here's a closer look at the Euro model, showing there actually is some troughiness beginning to develop in accordance with this system. The system is actually farther north of the screen. You cannot see it. I apologize for that. But the trough is actually going to help steer up this system. This system actually may bring some rainfall, potentially some significant rainfall to portions of the northeastern coastline. Here's a look at the extended range of the Euro model. What's pretty interesting about this is an area of high pressure is going to develop over the good portion of the eastern United States. With this moving in and the MJO finally beginning to merge back into, once again, a good portion of the Western Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific, look what's going on. It actually has potentially some tropical mischief developing over some areas over the Eastern Pacific into the Western Caribbean over the next several days. This is about 8 to 12 day period, so obviously something to continue to keep an eye on. Just keep that in the back of your head. Remember that we actually could have some tropical mischief over the next several days. Here's a look at the GFS showing Philippi, which is off on the right of your screen, moving out to sea. Looks like it's probably not going to pose any threat to the Azores at all. The GFS is obviously showing that broad area of low pressure, potentially trying to wrap itself up nicely over a good portion over the Bahamas, producing some very heavy rainfall, and obviously some heavy rainfall, obviously, over portions of Florida. Going into the next day, you see it ramps up into a nicely tropical storm. If this gets the name, this will become Rima. I believe that's the name of it. It will be Tropical Storm Rima. Wrapping up pretty nicely just northeast of St. Augustine, Florida, off the northeastern coast of Florida. Next day, it begins to potentially hug up against the Georgia coastline, so areas around Savannah, Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Columbia, and portions east prepare for some moderate to heavier rainfall across that region. And then as you move into the next day, this likely it has it making a landfall right around Charleston to just south of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and moving inland as a weakening tropical cyclone. Here's a look at the current MJO. It's pretty interesting. The next forecast models are beginning to extend this into our portion of our world, into Octant 1, which is around our region, which is the Eastern Pacific and the Western Atlantic. This likely will induce more tropical cyclone formation over the next 8 to 12 days. And all the reliable models are beginning to pinpoint on that situation occurring of the MJO beginning to move on to our part of the world. And with this moving to our part of the world, that means obviously we're going to have an increased risk of tropical cyclone formation over the Atlantic and obviously the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. So obviously interest around that region, the Gulf of Mexico, the Eastern Caribbean, the southeastern coastline, and the Bahamas will need to begin to pay very close attention to the tropics over the next several days and next several weeks. Once again, the good news with the system is it is going to bring some beneficial rainfall to portions of Florida. You can see the HPC is calling for potentially 11 to 12 inches of rainfall over a good portion of the eastern coast of Florida, which is obviously north of Miami. We're talking about portions of northern Miami, Palm Beach. We're also talking about some other areas around Sarasota, Florida, Daytona Beach, Florida. May get some significant rainfall with this system. Also look into the eastern portion of the United States. Look at this, the central portions, Texas. You actually may get some significant rainfall. Non-tropical, obviously, but with the trough that's moving in. And it's been moving very slowly. We're getting periods of shower and thunderstorm development around that region. So obviously some areas of Texas, that's the whole state of Texas in a severe drought, and actually could use this rainfall. And obviously a lot of people are hoping we get a good amount of rainfall. Obviously 10 inches of rainfall obviously is not going to help the situation. It's obviously way too much rainfall for that state to receive this quickly, but obviously they'll take it. But the bad news is with this, we also have some dry air in place over a good portion of the state of Texas and Oklahoma. Also, it is possible that we may not see 10 inches of rainfall right around this region. We may see a general area of 3 to 6 inches of rainfall. Last map I want to show you is the current hurricane models on Tropical Storm Philippi. Begins to move it off to the north and northeast. And you see they're in pretty good consensus with the National Hurricane Center forecast of carrying this off to the northeast, affecting no one except, once again, the Maritimes. And some of this rainfall in the longer term may, in fact, move into portions of Canada. May bring some rainfall into portions of Greenland, Iceland, Denmark, and portions of Europe. So, safely speaking, right now, this is going to become a very potentially a situation that the state of Florida needs to continue to keep a very close eye on. Once again, we could see the entire state of Florida receive over half a foot of rainfall over the next several days as this moves up farther off to the northeast. Portions of the Carolinas and Georgia may in fact receive some heavy rainfall as well. But right now, this does not look like it's going to be a significant tropical cyclone. We're not talking about a hurricane or anything, but potentially a subtropical system. But once again, we're going to continue to watch in the longer range in portions of the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean, obviously the southeastern Atlantic, as the MJO will finally move its way back into our part of the world, which may help induce some tropical cyclone formation over the next several weeks.